Hello Internet, my name is Andrew Eder, and welcome to another episode of Film Editorials. The topic of today's video is the newest entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Doctor Strange, which, as the name would suggest, was, weird. Benedict Cumberbatch plays Dr. Stephen Strange, who is a very, very good, but also very, very arrogant neurosurgeon living in New York City. But once his hands get messed up in a car crash, he can't do that anymore, so he goes on this big quest to try and heal his hands so he can return to his old life as a neurosurgeon. And long story short, he ends up with a bunch of mystics who, it turns out, they are actually a secret group of sorcerers who are trying to defend the world from some great interdimensional being who wants to kill everyone. That basic plot is fairly straightforward, I feel, and a little bit paint by numbers, especially for Marvel. Stephen Strange seems a lot like Tony Stark in that he's very good at what he does, but he's also very full of himself, and then he has to go on this journey of self-discovery when things don't go exactly his way. But I think that's in reaction to the fact that the thing that underpins this movie is this really bizarre type of magic. Magic is something they've basically avoided so far in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, Thor is kind of this magical being, but they spend the first Thor movie and most of the second Thor movie and most of the Avengers talking about how it's not magic, it's really just science that humans don't understand yet. This movie isn't about that. This movie is actually magic and prayers and chakras, and it's straight up magic. There's no technology involved here that is naturally really weird, so I think the filmmakers acknowledged that that was weird, and to make the film palatable to audiences, they decided to not do too much with the plot so that you could at least follow something that was going on. And I think this strategy was fairly effective. The movie is enjoyable enough. It might be a familiar series of events to make up a movie, but those plot points work. That's why they keep showing up over and over again in Marvel Cinematic Universes and movies in general. But since this movie doesn't take too many chances, it also doesn't stand out that much. Like, this movie has some funny parts, but it's not as funny as it could be, or as other films in the MCU are. This film also isn't terribly exciting. Like, there's action scenes, and they're okay, but Doctor Strange really isn't involved too much in the action. This movie's also a bit problematic because though most of the film is set in Asia, there's only one Asian character with speaking lines, which seems a little low. As with almost every other MCU villain we've seen so far, the villain in this movie, though played by Mads Mikkelsen and like kind of cool in design and just the fact that it's Mads Mikkelsen doing it, he's kind of lame. This isn't helped by the fact that he's actually a servant to a bigger enemy, and that bigger enemy actually comes into this film in the third act, so everything that goes on with Master Caecilius really doesn't end up being that important because he's not the driving force behind this movie. While we're on the subject of actors' performances, Benedict Cumberbatch does a really good job, I feel. He's just a joy to watch anyway. The only problem I have with his portrayal of this character is the fact that the character is American, and Benedict Cumberbatch's American accent is not the best in the world, or at least it slides around, especially when he has to say the letter R. Otherwise, he's fine. So long as he doesn't have to say that many R's, he can really deliver a speech. Chiwetel Ejiofor plays Mordo, who's Stephen Strange's best friend and then eventually enemy, and you actually see that transition happening in this film, and I actually really liked that part of the movie. I thought that was really well done. Probably the best part of this movie, just because it's a thing that a lot of movies try to do and don't do quite so successfully. Anakin Skywalker! And because this film is a big budget Marvel movie, it looks really nice. The effects are all really cool, especially like the cape. But I will say that I'm very glad I did not see this film in IMAX or 3D, because there are several sections of this film which have a lot of moving parts, clearly inspired by things like Inception and 2001: A Space Odyssey, and that must hurt your brain when you watch this in 3D. Just how much motion there is and how trippy things get, I would not want to see this movie in 3D. Obviously, the Disney marketing department does want you to go see this movie in 3D, so all their ads and stuff are saying that 3D is amazing, but I want to know what you thought of the movie in 3D. If you saw it in IMAX and or 3D, let me know down below in the comments so we can talk about how that experience was. Did you require an aspirin afterward? That kind of stuff. The last thing I want to talk about is that there are some interesting themes in this film, which unfortunately the film really doesn't get to develop. They kind of mention them and then just move on with the action. But I do think that they're interesting things to talk about and interesting things that get brought up in a Marvel movie. So maybe that's just a jumping off point for a discussion to happen outside of the movie, which is what we can do here. One of those is the dilemma between Strange and Mordo about rules. And Doctor Strange is there and basically selected to do what he does because he's okay with bending the rules. He can be creative and flexible, and that's how he gets out of a lot of the situations he ends up in. Mordo, on the other hand, is very much strictly following the rules, and this leads them to conflict. It's an interesting discussion to have, and they don't solve it in the movie, but I just thought it was an interesting thing for a Marvel movie to bring up. And the other thing is there's a scene where Strange has to actually kill a minion of the bad guy, and then when he comes back, he is showing remorse for this, and how he is a doctor and has sworn to do no harm, and how this conflicts with what he wants to do. So he doesn't want to go out and fight anybody else or kill anyone else. And this is a really interesting thing. It's pretty low-key, but a sort of non-violent Marvel hero, which is very rare, especially in today's climate where shoot-'em-ups are like a film genre. So I thought that was really interesting. Again, they don't spend a lot of time dealing with it, and they move on to the next action set piece. To be fair, he doesn't kill anyone in that set piece, at least not directly. So even though they don't spend a lot of time trying to resolve this discussion, the fact that they bring up the discussion at all is really interesting. And I will be interested to see where Doctor Strange goes from here as a character. Is he still going to have that Hippocratic oath guiding him? We don't really know at the end of this movie, so we'll just have to see. So, overall, I'm going to have to give Doctor Strange 3 stars out of 5. It was generally enjoyable and generally funny. It looked really nice. The performances by the main cast members are stellar, and there are hints at some really interesting themes that we haven't seen before in other films. On the other hand, the plot is very familiar and the villain very disposable. The cast of this film really isn't as diverse as it should be given the settings that the film is taking place in. And the fact that the structure of this film is based upon actual magic and not any kind of sci-fi element, really just fantasy, is a serious departure from the other films and not something that I was totally in love with. I get that that is part of the comics and part of the character as he is in the comics, but it's not my favorite element of it, so I'm going to have to give that as a minus. Okay, that's going to be it for today's video. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to leave a comment down below with what you thought of this movie overall, and specifically if you saw this in 3D, how was that experience? Please don't forget to like, favorite, share, subscribe, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Snapchat. And please don't forget to check out my friends over at The Good News Review, where they post substantive, positive news stories, not the stuff you see most of the time on the 24-hour news cycle. And I have a strong suspicion that we're going to need that kind of news story for the next, 4 years or so. I will see you guys next time. Bye!